Welcome to our Playwell podcast. My name is Sherry Morgan and I am the Director of Projects at Play Scotland, the national organisation for play. Today our Chief Executive, Marguerite Hunter-Blair, talks to Shweta Chari, who is the founder of Toybank, an organisation that supports children's development through play. Shweta has been a champion of children's right to play in India for over 20 years. I hope you enjoy their conversation. Hello and welcome, Shweta, to the Play Scotland podcast series. We are absolutely thrilled and delighted to be speaking to you today, not least because I am so pleased to hear that you really enjoyed the IPA Glasgow conference in the summer last year. I hope we can touch on that as we have our conversation today. So Shweta, just to begin, one of the things that really intrigues me about you, as well as the work you do, but is the fact that you have an engineering background and have become a leading children's rights champion in India, in Mumbai. So I wonder if you could tell us a wee bit about yourself and how you came to be this amazing children's play champion.
Thank you for having me here, Marguerite. I hope I pronounced it all right. I missed seeing you at the Glasgow conference and very happy to talk to you about it later in the conversation. I did my engineering, you're right, in electronics. And it's just one of those things that in a country like India, there's a lot of emphasis that's given to professional courses. So I actually wanted to get into humanities and study journalism, and I had a whole plan carved out for myself. But I come from one of those typical Indian families that focuses a lot on which degree are you going to get, and what kind of career path are you going to have, and all of that. So I sort of fell into that trap and I did my engineering. But I'm so glad I did it because it sort of taught me a lot of, it taught me the ability to think a certain way, and it built in a lot of organizational building and skills, which I didn't realize, which now I do after running an organization for so many years. So play happened to be something I firmly and always believed in right from my school days. But I never could speak about it. I didn't know the depth of it at the time, but I always understood it very intuitively, and I had the notion of how important it is for children to play, for me to be able to provide their playtime with whoever and wherever I am. I myself, and now I realize all of these things, which I didn't then, have a massive playful spirit. So I think that quotient of playfulness is quite high in me. So, which I'm able to realize today as of now. But I guess that's what must have got me going in the earlier years. But there's a story there as well in terms of how I volunteered and what I observed in our children. I used to go to a small home for boys, which very close to my house. These were about 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old young boys. And they just asked me to teach them maths and sciences, considering my background, which I did very sincerely. I was all of 21. So I was a bit impatient because I could see that none of these children were really interested in learning from me. They were not excited to see me. And that somewhere really got to me because I was also young and impatient and restless. So I stopped teaching them and I took permission to see, hey, what's going on in the center? What happens, through the day? And I observed for a few days that like me, there were a bunch of other tuition teachers or volunteers coming to teach them. So then I got curious to see, so when do they really play? What do they do in their free time? Do they have a free time? And then I surveyed and I saw there were these beautifully packed board games that were still in plastic cover and it had dust on it. So, and there were many such games. So then I just took permission from the authorities there and I said, listen, I just want to play with them. Is that all right? Because there are a lot of other teachers coming anyway. They were sweet enough to give me an hour every day just to hang around with these kids, which I did. I took my music, my Discman in those days, showed them different genres of music, Beatles, Indian classical, and whatnot. And we started playing box cricket and simple such games. And we were just casually talking. And through these conversations, we became the thickest of friends. These young little fellows, then this 21-year-old self, myself there. And there were so many things I learned about them. And there were so many things I learned about myself. And there's a massive icebreaker in the sense that these kids trusted me, and I learned that these kids were badly abused when they were younger, and they had actually made a choice to run away from their homes. So they were from different parts of India, and they had come to Mumbai in search of jobs. And I'm talking about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old kids. And they all wanted to grow up to just make money and send money back home. So they had made this choice to run away from the situation that they were there. So now these kinds of stories, and they were heart-wrenching. And, they were asking me questions like, don't you get abused? Like, as though it was a very normal thing that happens to every human being. So for me, it really shook me, because in those few playful moments, not only did we all open up to each other and we trusted each other, but there was so much of love and kindness and calm. In spite of the kind of aggressive childhood they've already had and they're still children, they were able to casually converse about things just through play. And it was beautiful. And that somewhere got me thinking about play.
Shweta, there's so much in what you've just told us. That story is just so amazing. And we could possibly spend the next few hours just unpicking a lot of what you said there. I'm going to try on and cover more about what you're doing now, but I have to say, it's just incredible, that story. And not only is it incredibly uplifting, it is that thing that you're talking about, that through play, so much was achieved there. You're talking about attachment, emotional bonds, but also learning. When you play these board games, there's usually counting. There's usually squares forward, backwards. You're usually accumulating. If it's Monopoly, I'm thinking you're trying to buy houses. If it's Cluedo here, you're trying to work out who did it in a murder mystery. There's a lot of learning as well. But yes, that building bonds and relationships is essential. And as you say, with such difficult backgrounds, you were bringing a lot to their lives. And interesting, you felt you learned a lot about yourself at the same time. But I'm going to move on. Fascinating. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. I know you now work for an organisation called Toybank is the project. And it's all about development through play. And that you are based in Mumbai, and it's a flagship project for the Opentree Foundation. So I feel there's a lot there for us to learn about too. So I wonder if you could tell us a wee bit about the foundation and about Toybank, and really how it came about and what you think the main successes have been of the project.
Yeah. So since this initiation, in a way, like of play in my mind, I just volunteered for the first 6 years. So literally from 2004 to 2010, I had a full-time job. I worked as an engineer for a bit, and I ran this Toybank project on the side. It was literally the name I'd given to it, because I'd really not given it any thought. But the idea was to, in the early days, collect ethically good games and toys and distribute them to the lesser privileged kids, to the at-risk children from different communities in Mumbai. And we rapidly did this in those 5-6 years, to the extent that voluntarily we had chapters across 5-6 states in the country. And it was all done free of cost. We were all just giving our time. And there were hundreds of volunteers from across. So we literally just morally, ethically good games, sorted them, cleaned them, recycled all of them, wrapped them in lovely, paper, and distributed them to children. But then this spread so much that many of our partners, the NGOs that were receiving these games, got in touch with us asking us, can you give us more games where teachers could learn about these games? How can teachers use these games? So very organically it began. And I then took a call that, hey, you know what? Let me register this as a charity. I registered this very quickly. I quit my full-time corporate job. And I just went into this full-time, completely like a crazy person. But I had no big plan, roadmap, nothing. But I knew that I have to do this because the need is so high, and we got to do something like this because it's something so valuable to our children. So that's how I really started the organization. But it grew. There were so many pivoting. We are now in our 20th year. And we have evolved from just being a toy bank. So which is why we now keep saying the Opentree Foundation, because at least people get curious to ask us, hey, what is that about? because they make a huge assumption with the name Toybank. We now set up play-to-learn centers inside of government schools, low-income private schools, wherever there are children. They could be homes for children who are at risk, children who are in orphanage homes. So wherever there are children, we collaborate. It's a partnership model. We don't house our own kids, but we ensure that all of these agencies, we provide them the entire play-to-learn activities. So we set up these centers for them. So, and over here, we have a beautiful play pedagogy, a nice curriculum that we've built in, very contextual to the Indian setup and the Indian environment in which the children are growing up. Because, you travel a few miles or few kilometers, the context completely changes for the child. So we had to curate our program in such a way that we're able to address different behavioral needs in children, depending on where they're growing up. And so that's how the model sort of evolved. And today, the organization impacts close to 80,000 children. And we have about 620 plus Toybank play-to-learn centers. These are safe spaces for the children. We piggyback on the space given to us by these government schools. And children come here. They have our play period is embedded in the school timetable now. These are very big things for us because in the Indian context, still play is a very abstract concept because there are so many other issues and challenges. So, but it's wonderful now that over the years, there's somewhere a great buy-in. So the push is reduced and the pull is increased. I'm very, very happy about that.
That sounds amazing, really, isn't it? And to scale up to that extent in a relatively short space of time, a generation really is incredible. I feel we have a lot in common. In Scotland here, play pedagogy is a key concern for the education sector, for the play sector as well. And we've been working alongside education colleagues to try and get a whole school approach to play pedagogy in the primary element of play, of schooling. But obviously it's important in the high schools as well. And it was interesting you were talking about at the beginning about children travelling to the city to get work, to contribute to family life back where they came from in these districts. And I don't know if you want to say a wee bit about play and placemaking and how children can actually contribute to improving where they live. Do they have a voice in how their community and places develop?
Yeah, that's a really great question. To contextualize, so our children, by the children that we work, come from extremely sort of difficult home environments. It varies actually. Some of them are, exposed to domestic violence at a very, very early age. So they think that that's how it is. And so the standards are that sometimes young kids end up telling me things like, my father's really a nice person because he doesn't beat my mother. And so that's the kind of levels they're at because that's so common and that's so normal. And then it's kind of worrisome because you clearly know that how can you tell this child that this is not normal, like how can you tell that child? So, and then there are children who are, in substance abuse and different kinds of addictions. There are children who come from sometimes extremely they're below poverty line. So it's ridiculous. Like they can't, it's the kind of money they make per day is so less that it's hard for them to even get 1 square meal a day sometimes. So but there are good things happening in the sense that there are these shelter, they're called ashram shalas. So basically they're like home schools, where these low income or the kids below poverty line they study there. So they're like boarding schools for these kids. So they're taken care of in a way that it's a safe space. They're given food, daily meals. They're given, a set of soap and fresh towels, and they're given like a uniform and a pair of shoes. But really, really speaking, outside of this, they'd be on the streets. So it therefore becomes that much more important in a way for us to have these collaborations to make these institutes work, to make them compelling for the kids to not drop out, for us to be able to liven them up, to make children feel like children again, to make them feel they should forget about the horrendous things that they may have faced earlier on, at least for that moment of play that they have. So they're able to sort of even understand and are able to process it in a different way. Rather than, see, we keep talking about breaking the cycle of poverty. Yes, that's one thing where there are life skills that are being inculcated into our children through our programs. We're hoping that it will surely be impacting the employability skills as they grow up, the kind of jobs they will get. So eventually, yes, that will happen. But for me, the greater thing is, will it break the cycle of the thought process? Can they think differently about themselves and about who they want to be when they grow up? Can our play programs influence that to some extent? Naturally, play does it. But if we mindfully do it as facilitators and drive it in that direction, we will for sure get there. Kids don't have to bother. They subconsciously are absorbing everything. We just have to be, so which is why the program also is called as a conscious play program at Toybank. We're very aware of the role we play as facilitators. And we understand that how complex this can be, because for everybody it looks like frivolous time pass. But for our children, the children and us have a silent dialogue that's constantly on, because they actually know what's going on, why that's so important. And we want them to sort of become the torchbearers of play. Can these children themselves become stories to tell, themselves become kind of examples for the next generation, and become torchbearers for play in India?
Yeah, that's great. It makes me think immediately of the Peak project in Glasgow, where young children become young people in the project and they become young leaders. And certainly the current chief executive has come through from somebody who went to the project and program and is now the leader of it. So I think that, we have so much in common. Now, there's something else I know that you talk about, having passionate change makers to assist you in this project and program. And that reminds me of our play workers we have here in Scotland and the play sector and the play work profession, which kind of looks at a lot of the children's workforce, and we try and they're not all play workers, but we try and have some training always available to develop an understanding of the importance of play for children's development and for their health and well-being. So these passionate change makers that you have developed, this group of people in India, could you tell us a bit about them and their backgrounds, where they come from? Do you have a training program? And really how you support them to do what sounds like incredibly challenging work?
It is. We work with the government school teachers. So they are our play champions. In fact, we have a play practitioner program where we are developing these government school teachers to become play practitioners themselves. It's very, very tough because everybody is a first generation learner themselves in a way. So this is these teachers themselves are the first generation educators, and they've actually studied. Second of all, breaking that norm of the how. How did you study? How are our children studying? Because it's so standard, right? You go through the rote method, you go through the whole process of learning, which is the same standard classroom, blackboard. To get to this stage, it's taken 100 years. So now that they're here, how are you going to question? Who are you to question me? How am I teaching? So it becomes extremely difficult to train these teachers to become play practitioners. But of course, we've now spent almost close to 2 decades. So there is a beautiful rapport and a bond that we've built with all of them. So now they have become, so they recommend us to other teachers who are still not into this program. And we're also working in a way, so there's a beautiful line, and this is the ethos of our foundation, which works very well with our play practitioners. It's Frederick Douglass's line that goes by, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken adults. And this is such a powerful line. And somebody like him, who was a child slave himself, has said, which has a huge bearing on how our play champions understand play, and so become play champions. These kids eventually become those torchbearers for us to take place. So while adults take a long time to unlearn and learn, these kids are learning like super fast. So I have my hopes pinned on them. And these are our play champions.
And it's great. I saw that quote on your website. And again, I feel it's something we've got in common. Do you know this about building strong, resilient children? It's not just really good for them, but for society and economically, to put the resources in early on to really give our children the best start in life, genuinely give them the best start in life, will actually, save local authorities and government's money at the other end when they don't have to pay for the consequences of not giving children this best start in life. And certainly we've got amazing people in Scotland. I'm thinking of Suzanne Zedick and others who talk about this and educate a lot of us along the way. And I just wondered how you use the natural environments around you to support children's development and play opportunities.
It's a great question, and it's a tough one for me to answer, because to give you a sense, I'll give you an example of a community that we work with in Mumbai. It's a slum community, and literally the entire community, I think 60 to 70% of the population that lives there lives in one-room houses. So these are like 150 square feet at the max. And they have common bathrooms outside, but this is like one small room. And this is a dense slum community. One of the reasons why we were actually summoned to work there is because they don't have outdoor space. Because it's so jam-packed with houses without any boundaries. They just talk to each other. And the space within and it's so cramped because there are so many people living in that small area. So the kids don't have much space. And that's I'm particularly talking about the urban slums in Mumbai. You have completely a contrasting version of this, which is the rural areas, where they're in the more interiors of India. And we work in the state of Maharashtra, so I'll talk for that, is there's so much space. There is like a lot of grounds and open areas. But again, it's not really utilized to that extent. What happens typically is they'll create these spots. They'll have sports spaces. So they'll have a huge cricket ground maybe, or they'll have typically sports for boys. So there'll be like a bit of football, like a rough football kind of a ground they've created, or maybe a volleyball space. But there's no sense of the girls. So you will typically see a lot of the girls, yes, there are a few girls who will play here and there, but it's a large group just doesn't. So they're sitting in corners, and typically the boys get to have this. But it's not even done in a way, while they're playing, it's great, but there's no one who's really facilitating this for these children. It gets a little tricky to answer your question in terms of even if there is space, it's the loose path, and these concepts they don't exist. They're completely novel ideas for these people. And in urban slums, there's absolutely no space. There are no open playgrounds that much. And if they're booked, there's no common play spaces. It's a mess in terms of the whole play scene in the urban area.
And that is fascinating, because obviously Scotland and Glasgow in particular, known as the dear wee green place. I think that's what Glasgow literally means. And so interesting to hear, Shweta, that you are at the IPA Glasgow conference, June 2023, possibly with the best weather ever Glasgow has had in June in my living memory. I wonder if you could tell us maybe what your highlights were for coming to Glasgow to the IPA conference and what a difference it made to you.
I don't even know where to start, actually, because and I'll be honest and candid to tell you that literally from the word go, I was just tearing up in every session. I used to just tear up sitting in, and some of the sessions were, very simple. Like they were not even like, but every session, I think I used to just tear up, just thinking, oh my God, when is it going to happen in India? Why can't we do this here? This is so simple. This is so easy. This is so this, this is so that. And everything was so relatable. Just the energy of the whole space, the people, it was unbelievable. Like you just mentioned Peak. I attended Peak's session at the conference. I bumped into Tony. Tony conducted the session for us. And I just couldn't stop talking to him. after that. I asked him, come to India, train my team. We need more play workers like you. This whole term of play worker I never heard this before. We have social worker, which is very popular in India. I brought this term here saying, hey, now all our program delivery guys, you guys are not just our outreach officers, but you're our outreach play workers. And they felt so proud of it. So I learned so many things. In fact, some of the people I've been still in touch with, I still have my conversations. One of them we've even collaborated with, because there are in India, play is such a new concept. There's no one to speak to in terms of our peers. So there's no reference. So if I'm building out assessments for my program, I don't have any reference in the Indian context, because nobody is doing play for play's sake. It is always used as one of the activities and that's it. And then it's just like an icebreaker, really. It's not the hero of anything. I want to make play at the core, the central piece of every conversation. I want it to be embedded in the culture of India. Like, how can we make the right to play a reality in a massive country like ours with 1.3 billion people? So I'm on that trajectory and my head spins around there. So at the Glasgow conference, I was mind blown. So I don't know how to explain it. Every session I had goosebumps. I had to run to wipe my tears in some of the sessions because I looked like an idiot. And why are you crying on a play conference? But I was actually getting overwhelmed with the depth of play and how ahead everybody is when they talk about play and how brilliant they are when they think, and the kind of articulation now they have about play. Just today, in fact, I think Robin shared a fantastic piece, I think it was a post in Guardian about how much outdoor play helps, the comparison between children who play outside and inside. I mean, this is just, I actually commented, and I look forward to the day when we will move away from just explaining the value of play to actually asking the sufficiency of play. Why can't we move to asking how much rather than why of play? Like, we're still stuck there. And I still have to answer these questions because it's just, in India, there are so many other problems. But I think they've got this entire formula wrong. I honestly think that play can solve so many world problems. Just having the playfulness and the playful spirit, the way our being is and the brain gets wired at such young ages because of play, can really sort out so many areas in humanity. And we've just not got this right. We're just sitting and goofing around with such serious issues. And look at the state of the world as of today. It really, really bothers me. So I don't know when we're going to be able to change these mindsets. It's such a hard day. Sometimes I wish there was a magic pill to do that. Just make everyone into a person.
Shweta, it's so lovely to hear you say all of that. It reminds me of a quote, which is anonymous. I don't know whoever said it, but it was, it's along the lines of, someone should do something about this. And then you realize, I am someone. I need to do something about this. And I feel that we all have to start somewhere. And we've all been on the journey that you've talked about, where we have started, we don't really think we started at the right place or at the right time, but we've started and we've no idea where we're going to get to or how long it's going to take or how many wrong turns we're going to make along the way. But the importance is getting started on the journey. And you are well started on this journey. You're 20 years down the road and you seem to have achieved so much already. And I think it's easy sometimes to go to a conference and think everyone else is sorted. But they're not. It's maybe a project that's working really well, or a piece of research that has maybe got some case studies that show how it can work. But trying to scale that up in any country, it's difficult, and that consistent application of what we know is right is difficult and challenging. And I think one of the best things that we get sometimes at these conferences as well is the peer-reviewed research that allows us to make the case for change. But as you say, meeting a real play worker in real time who tells you what they're doing can be mind-blowing as well. And you've told such interesting tales to us today, anecdotes of how you can make a difference to children's lives. And of course, what I really want to know 20 years on is what happened to those children, when they were 5 or 6, when you went in and started playing board games with them. You would love to be able to open up a book, go to that chapter and see what they're doing now. But one thing I'm absolutely sure of is that you have made such a difference in their lives through play. And I think that's a challenge many of us have set ourselves, even though we don't know where it's going to take us, how successful we're ever going to be. And I'm sure you're like us. There's days where you have absolutely no job satisfaction, and other days where, as you described, it's overwhelming and we have to wipe the tears away. I want to say thank you very much for speaking to us today. It's just been an absolute pleasure to listen to what you've had to say. And I hope we get to speak again at some time as well.
There's a lot of work to be done, Marguerite, for us. I am gunning for the right to play, and hopefully in my lifetime that happens.
Shweta, I'm sure of it. Honestly, you inspire me so much, and I can understand why people are knocking on your door asking you to come out and work in their schools. I just want to say a huge thanks, Shweta, for being on our podcast series. It has been an absolute pleasure and inspiration to hear you speaking today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Marguerite. It means a lot to be talking to you. We look up to organizations like yours. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this podcast. To find out more about the work of Toybank, see the episode information. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your preferred app. To find out more about Play Scotland, please follow us on X @PlayScotland and visit our website at playscotland.org.